Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Bruce Jackson, who is Associate General Counsel of Microsoft, also Managing Director of Strategic Partnerships. And Bruce, in the context of this conversation, welcome. You are the author of Never Far From Home, My Journey from Brooklyn to Hip Hop, Microsoft, and the Law. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. And I look at this as a privilege to really be here with you today.
Well, no, I appreciate that. Let's start with the fact of why now? What made you decide to write a book now?
Well, I think why now? Essentially, I was asked by some of my former clients. I was an entertainment attorney in the past,
Yep.
and their philosophy was, Bruce, it's probably the right time for you to write a book because people within our community, urban community, want to aspire to be an athlete or an entertainer. And you are a part of that community. However, you carved a different niche.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to basically inform people that there are other options outside of being a basketball player or an entertainer that they should pursue. And that was the basis of it.
You did gravitate toward the world of entertainment early on. I want to start the background that you talk about in your book, whether it's, I believe you were accused of robbery at 10, you saw a friend being murdered at 15. It's a very tough upbringing, which could have made you bitter. It did not. Why is that in your mind?
I think because I was looking for a better option for me and my family, particularly the core women. Women are important in my life, right? So it was my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother that really was the core of my existence, right? And the purpose I had to move forward for them, as well as the next generations of Jacksons and others, right? To inspire people to achieve more, to reach their potential.
You were in the music industry during a really interesting period, both for hip hop, but also in terms of this transition toward streaming and such. Talk a bit about your experience there, because I'm sure it's helped to inform what you do at Microsoft too.
There's no question about it. I think first of all, I like to say, I think the 90s was the best music time for music,
I
whether it's
agree.
R&B or hip hop, that time period. But no, I think one of the things I constantly inform people to do, people I mentor, I say you got to be strategic about your career, just like companies are strategic. And what companies tend to do is look ahead and see what's before them so they can have a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And I think people should do the same thing with their career. So what I constantly do is look at whatever industry I'm in. I look at what it was in the past, where it is today, and where it's headed in the future. And so the music industry is no different. So what I realized when I was practicing music, we had the physical distribution of music. We talk about digital transformation a lot now, companies digitally transforming. But in terms of the music industry, that took place in 2000. And you may say, Bruce, what do you mean by that? Well, it was a physical distribution of music. Albums is what music was distributed by.
Napster.
However, Napster came into existence, and that created a digital distribution of music. So it was a shift. And at that point, I thought it would have been to my advantage to go to a technology company and understand the technology aspect of it. And at the same time, helping Microsoft get into the music industry as well. So it played two roles. So my benefit was to learn technology. Microsoft's benefit was to have someone who was already in the music industry and help them kind of merge technology and music together, collapse it. And so I went to Microsoft so I can have a competitive advantage. The whole purpose was to turn around in 1 or 2 years and go back to the music industry. But as you and everyone else know, the music industry didn't quite embrace that change, that shift, and it turned the music industry upside down. They didn't determine a business model that would work under digital distribution of music until recently. Things started to change for the music industry.
But so you've been at Microsoft now for what, 15 years? How long?
Oh, no, 23 years.
23. My gosh. So forgive me for that. That's right. Of course. So 2000. You talk in the book about navigating the culture there. What advice would you have to other people, Black or otherwise, about coming into a culture like Microsoft, big tech, very white? If you could go back and talk to yourself 23 years ago, any advice you'd give?
I think the only difference in Microsoft is mind you, it was 23 years ago when I moved out from New York to Seattle. Seattle wasn't diverse. And Microsoft wasn't diverse at all at that point. I was the third African-American hired by that point in 2000. One left, so it was just two of us there when I got there. So it was a feeling of loneliness, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes I felt that as an African-American. It was just loneliness and not being included. So the advice I would give is that those in the majority, make sure you include those who are in the minority, and not just in decision makings, but in terms of socialization. I was going to leave Microsoft, to be quite honest with you, after 2 years, and solely based on the lack of diversity in Seattle or Microsoft at that point. And it wasn't until Brad Smith, who was our vice chair, approached me and said, I get you, I understand. Let's see if we can get you back to New York. And two, I promise you we'll make this place different. And he's done that.
Do you think that George Floyd, in terms of as a pivot point for corporations around sort of thinking about the Black experience in the workplace, was it a pivot point for you as well, Bruce? And do you think that you've noticed a change in Microsoft or elsewhere because of it?
Well, I think the change started to occur early on in Microsoft, or I wouldn't be here for 23
Right, of
years.
course, yeah.
I think the George Floyd situation just highlight what has been going on for years, right? I grew up in the environment and I noticed police brutality. I saw a friend get killed. So it was not new to me. It was just the invent of cameras, i.e. technology, that exposed it to the rest of the world. And more importantly, it exposed to the rest of the world that innocent people like myself could be a victim of such crime.
You know, my kids, I'm in Brooklyn myself. My, kids are in the public school system. And I often think about what's the state of the American dream today. And I love that your title, Never Far From Home. You take a lot of pride in being from Brooklyn. In terms of the young kids who are growing up now in the U.S., do you think they have the kinds of opportunities that you had? Because you really created your own, script.
Well, I think that's the problem, right? I think what I often tell people, I want young people to really believe, the message is believe in yourself. You can be whatever it is you want to be, bet on yourself.
Yeah.
And learn to block out the noise. Because there's going to be a lot of negative noise that your dream is unrealistic. And I'm telling young kids, dream big and bold, right? And so I think in terms of the resources, if you take a kid, let's say from Brownsville projects in Brooklyn, and you place them in an affluent area anywhere, whether it's New Jersey or Westchester, that kid would do well. And if you take a kid out of one of those affluent areas and put him in Brownsville projects, that kid will struggle. So the question is, why have the system kind of failed a community of people? And the same can hold true for rural America, right? They just don't have the resources. So we just need to give these individuals the resources that's necessary for them to reach their potential, right? They do want to achieve greatness. They too want to get out of their predicament. We just got to give them the tools that are necessary for them to do that.
I think there's been a lot of discussion about the culture at Microsoft in a very positive way, especially since, Satya Nadella came in. When you're talking to other leaders, what is your message to them from this book? Because it's very much oriented to your peers as well as to that next generation.
Right. I think when I talk about leaders, it's all about, let's try to create equity for everyone, right? If you're in a majority, put yourself in a minority situation and see how you feel. And what are some of the changes you would want to implement to make yourself comfortable? Because that's what we want, right? But then I also think that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's not just the Caucasian male that has to really comply and is subject to that. We have to look at women, minorities, and immigrants who too are in leadership positions, right? And look at their teams and determine whether or not their team's diverse, right? And are they spending money on diverse vendors outside? So I think D&I is applicable for everyone. We all are accountable for that, not just the Caucasian men.
When you think about the pivot points in your career, obviously the decision to go to Microsoft was one. Were there others that you would point to that you think really helped to shape you as a leader?
Well, I think that early on, I think my decision to go to Hofstra University, right? At that point, started to shape who I am. And I wanted to quit, to be quite honest with you, when you read the book, after about 2 weeks. And it was the call that I made to my mother and my aunt, where they basically said, hey, listen, we picked cotton in the South, and we could not look certain people in the face. And so you have to do it for us. And there's no one in the family ever graduate. That's why not only those three have been the core, but women throughout my entire career have intervene to be sponsors, mentors, and just intervene at the right point, right, to carry me forward.
One other thing I'm very curious about, Bruce, because, one of the challenges when we talk about diversity, we talk about it in the broadest sense of the word, and yet there's something unique about the Black experience in America, and we certainly saw that during George Floyd. Do you feel like we were paying enough attention to that specifically? Because you write about it very poignantly in the book, and it's tough to talk about it, but at the same time, we have so many challenges right now before the Supreme Court and other places that if we don't talk about it, we risk sort of creating conditions for a community to move backwards.
No, I think you're right. A lot of things, current events taking place now that it appears as though we're going backwards. So we have to certainly talk about it. But we have to talk about it, I think, in the sense that we talk about the other groups, right? Because I think we have to work together, right, to remove barriers for all of us. And we have to be allies to one another. So whether it's women, whether it's immigrants, whether it's the Hispanic community, we all have obstacles and challenges. And I think that we have to come together, right, to remove them. Because if it's us today, it could be you tomorrow.
I know you've been doing a lot of talks around the book and such. In terms of the reaction that you're getting so far, I do think it's a very inspiring message for the young generation. Anything that has surprised you, or do you find it's resonating? You must have colleagues who've read it as well. What's their reaction been?
Well, many of them are saying, Bruce, you're telling my story. I'm just afraid to tell that story. I'm glad that you were brave enough to tell the story, and I know that I'm not alone. And this is not just African Americans, right? These are immigrant women, other just colleagues. People have similar struggles and challenges.
Yeah,
they're just afraid to share it. But I tell them all that we have to share it because it's the most incredible tool we have to inspire the next generation. They have to see it in order to believe it. If they don't see it, it's hard to achieve it. So I agree. We have to share our story.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us, because I think it's a great story, and I think you're right. It gives hope to a lot of other people, and it's now that you're not far from home, does it make a difference being in New York?
No. I think not far from home. The irony is that Microsoft office is a mile away from where I grew up in the projects. I constantly go there to visit family and friends. So this is home to me.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, Bruce, and good luck. I hope people get the book. It's called Far From Home, and we're talking with Bruce Jackson. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.